I gotta say, it made for great TV, Norm. Like, honestly, I was cackling when the show dropped. It was a Friday. I don't do Rising on Friday, so I was kind of lounging around in bed, and I was like, "Little clear my schedule. I will not be roused for the next 5 hours or 2.5 hours because I did double speed until I listened to every word of this, and it surpassed every expectation. Not just because of the drama and kind of the hilarity of your obvious contempt for the lack of intellectual rigor that Destiny brought to the debate, but also substantively, both you and Muin Rabbani were just so thorough and persuasive, and you each brought different things to the debate, different kind of attitudes that have had effect working, I think, in tandem to address the claims that were coming from the other side of the table, kind of different tonal modes that I think played well with each other, kind of a good cop, bad cop, if you will. And it was so satisfying and so informative. And you say, okay, it doesn't have as much reach as going on mainstream news, or that you haven't been invited on mainstream channels in the US, but there are millions of views on that video.
Please don't tell me that. That's going to ruin it.
Norm, it's a great thing. There are millions of views on that video. There are millions of views on your interviews with Jordan Peterson's daughter and Candace Owens. And remember that CNN only gets 500,000 views on a primetime airing?
Well, I have to tell you, Muin, who I love to death, I've known him for 30 years. We met in the early 1980s. We had a fundamental clash over what you call tonal mode. Because Muin said, I am going to speak not to them, but to the broader audience and enlighten them on the facts, and just ignore the other people in the room. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe you're going to do that, Muin, but I am taking my sledgehammer to the porcelain vase. I am going to smash it to smithereens. So every time Muin got into a serious mode, as he answered that thing called destiny, I was like, what the fuck are you doing, Muin? You are making this sack of shit. Seriously, that is not going to happen on my watch. Every statement of mine was prefaced by, you moron. I think, do you know what it means, Brie? I prefer Briahna. Do you know what it means? When you spent 42 years reading every scrap, every footnote, not once, not twice, but 3 times, because I'm a forensic scholar. I'm looking to analyze the text and figuring out what is wrong with this argument. I know it's wrong, but why? And, it's a very intensive mental expenditure of energy. And then this guy, 3 months ago, he boasts about the fact that he could find Israel on the map. He thought that Erdogan was the prime minister of Israel. And he says, he's telling his viewers, believe me, I've never seen that program, never will, but people are emailing me, Finkelstein, be careful, he's going to destroy you. Finkelstein, he's really ready now for you. I'm thinking, what the fuck are you talking about? A guy who gets all his knowledge from Wikipedia is going to destroy me? Do you know what an affront that is? What an affront that is? So I was determined, nope. And the funniest part, of course, was every time I called him a moron, Benny Morris burst into laughter.
Oh my God, okay. So that was amazing. Your unintentional, calling him the wrong name repeatedly.
Absolutely. Let me tell you. And I love the church for not lying. I don't lie. Okay? After the 5 hours, I walk out with Marie, and he turns to me and he goes, "That was really funny. You keep changing his name." Your name, please?
Stephen Bonnell.
Okay. Mr. Bonnell, I'm a lot more literate than you, Mr. Borelli.
I'm going to believe that's not controversial.
Mr. Bonnell.
Literally,
Mr.
you can
Borelli,
Google it. You can
Mr.
Google
Borelli,
it.
with all
Mr.
due
Finkelstein.
respect, the problem, Mr. Morelli, is you don't know the English language. With all due respect to Mr. Bonnell, to see the misrepresentations that Mr. Bonnell, Mr. Borelli, Mr. Borelli,
I didn't want to read one. Let him read.
Mr. Borelli, please don't teach me about the English language.
Did you read the case?
Yeah.
It is
Mr.
a highly
Borelli,
special intent.
I'm going to ask you again.
Genocide. Yes.
Please stop displaying your imbecility.
Okay, I'm sorry if you think the declaration of the judge is imbecile.
Don't put on public display that you're a moron.
Display on camera if you're comfortable putting yours in books. Okay?
I read the case around 4 times.
They just don't show genocidal intent.
Brace yourself.
The Israeli Minister of Finance on the 8th of October war.
Mr. Bonnell.
Wait, you do know how to pronounce my name. Are you mispronouncing it intentionally?
He made you into an Italian all the time.
It may be meaningless to you, Mr. Bonnell.
It was meaningless to everyone in the region.
Mr. Bonnell.
Who owned the Gaza Strip before 67?
Mr. Bonnell, don't change the subject.
The actual
Destiny
alternative.
should talk about making money off of idiocy. Listen to this.
The only option is
Mr. Bonnell
combat.
is now an expert on Palestinian mentality.
Where it was a good
We
faith
have a
effort.
written record.
With all due respect.
We have a written
Mr.
record,
Pop
Mr.
Historian.
Borrell.
You can't even read the written records. I don't know why you're referring to it.
Excuse
Okay?
me? I just said there are 15,000 pages on Annapolis.
And I'm sure you cherry-picked your favorite quotes
I
from
know,
all of
cherry
them,
pick.
okay?
Hey,
That's great. That's
Mr.
great.
Borrell, at least I had a quote to cherry
That's
pick.
great.
All you have
and
is Wikipedia.
I gave you quotes.
All you
I
have
can
is
give you quotes. Do you want
Wikipedia.
quotes? They asked for all of Israel in 67. What do you
Mr.
think those
Bonnell,
wars were about? You're not going to respond to anything I'm saying because you have no answer.
I'll respond to you.
That's correct.
Okay, Mr. Bonnell.
If you're a historian, if you do all this work, you did the things, tell me what they said. Don't just tell me a sentence. Tell me by what
Mr.
metric.
Bonnell.
Because they were fake, or that maybe 51% of the people were killed.
Look, I said, what are you talking about? He said you kept calling him different names. I said, Maureen, what are you talking about? I had no idea I was doing that.
That makes it even better.
You know, to use your generation's expression, that guy so triggered me. You know, just being in the same room as him, I just couldn't hold it in. I'll tell you, this is the honest to God truth. Honest to God. I knew I was out of control. I knew it. I was out of control. So I'm waiting for Friedman to stop me.
Yeah.
So I'm turning to him, and he has this, I was waiting for him to say, okay, Norman, this is a civil debate. We can't use, I was waiting for the lecture because I did not have the inner wherewithal to stop him. I needed somebody else to put on the brake. And he has this impish grin on his face like he's enjoying it. And then Denny Morris is chortling. He's not just laughing, he's chortling. So there was nothing to stop me. I didn't want to go down. Okay, I wasn't going to legitimize him, but I didn't intend on calling him every other minute a moron. That was not my modus operandi. You know, to use it discreetly. No. So
that's a really fun detail because we couldn't see Lex Friedman's face. He wasn't on camera for most of the debate, right?
A grin on his face.
So that's useful. And what you're saying about Benny Morris, we all saw, obviously. And then the thing was, what part of what made it so delicious was, despite obviously having these substantive disagreements with Benny Morris, you obviously, like, it was a clear contrast between the respect that you had for him as a scholar and the disrespect that you had in Destiny. So it was clear that it wasn't just about, I'm mad at someone who disagrees with me.
No.
It really was a more core contempt that was rooted in kind of the audacity that Destiny demonstrated and making all of these claims that he knew so little about and which were so unsubstantiated, and the lack of respect that he brought, frankly, to the conversation.
Well, the presumption that you can read 3 Wikipedia entries and then say things like, you don't know what plausible, you don't know what plausible means. And he just, every statement of his, it had the level of presumption. He says, the South African delegation, he says their application was so irresponsible. He said it was criminal, the South African application. Then he said the International Court of Justice, they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, on the basis of a Wikipedia entry, no, this is just completely off the wall. And I was determined I'm not going to legitimize him. You know, Boeing was having these very serious conversations. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, it worked really, really well. I should go ahead and introduce you, Norm, since we've been going for like 15 minutes now. If you haven't already realized it, I'm talking to the great Norman Finkelstein, who is coming off quite a run of debates, I guess you can call them, and not just the debates, but your presence online has been really remarkable. It seems like it's a weird thing to say because of the grievous tragedy of everything that's going on and, you know, the reason we're talking about this right now. But it is good, I gotta say, to kind of see you maybe having a little fun in the context of that conversation and being validated so broadly, even if it is just in the online kind of independent media sphere. That is where the action is. And I wouldn't shake a stick at that. And I've also enjoyed your increased Twitter presence. You mentioned that you didn't intentionally misname and dead name Destiny, but I did see your April Fool's tweet, which read, Mr. Vermicelli once read a book. Actually, April Fools.
Well, he said,
LOL.
I said, you know, what are you doing? Between us, we've read around 10,000 books, and you've read 3 Wikipedia entries. What are you doing here? And he said, oh, you read books? What a waste of time. That's what he said, a waste of time to read books. I mean, the guy is, I mean, he's just like a moron on a heroic scale. He claims that he went to play, you know, he was at the conservatory at the University of Nebraska, and he was learned the keyboard and the organ with him. He's the kind of guy who thinks after 3 years, he mastered chopsticks. Okay, he mastered chopsticks after 3 years, and now he's ready for the Tchaikovsky competition. I mean, it's just breathtaking.
I mean, I'm curious, Norman, how you've sort of been dealing with the aftermath, because as I understand it, he's been on his show trying to do some kind of victory lap. You know, he hasn't allowed the debate to stay kind of within the 4 corners of you all being in the room together, and has instead, you know, continued to throw grenades, as it were, and claim victory on some of these points, the mens rea point and some of the others on his own show. I'm wondering, are you surprised by that? Have you felt compelled to continue to engage? Would you like a rematch? I mean, how are you feeling about it all?
No, I would never have. I didn't want the original. Let me be clear about that, because I take the life of the mind seriously. It may not be a first rank or a second rank, and maybe not a third rank scholar, but I take the life of the mind seriously. I should hope I do. I invested my entire adult life in it as a complement to my politics. I do believe, because I'm part of a tradition where those who led the movement, they also possess not only courage, discipline, but very impressive mental powers. They all graduated at the top of their class. They all were widely read not just in economics and politics, but in literature and in art. These were, for me growing up, they were stupendous historical figures, not least because of their erudition. So, I mean, I'm speaking of Marx himself, Engels, a Lenin, a Rosa Luxemburg, a Trotsky. I mean, these were first-rank minds, not just historical political figures. These are first-rank minds. I mean, it's still daunting to me to read them and try to digest intellectually what they have to say. When Lex Friedman first proposed the debate, he proposed it with destiny. I said, that's not going to happen. I wouldn't even debate a person with one name. You know, I'm not debating I'm not debating Cher, and I'm not debating destiny. You know, that's not going to happen. So he then came back to me a few weeks later and he said, how about if you go on with Benny Morris? I said, fine. You know, Benny Morris, I think, his politics are appalling. In fact, they're beyond appalling. They're murderous. They're genocidal. Yeah, he advocates nuking Iran. I think that's off the spectrum. Okay.
Wow.
So he actually during the debate, I kept saying, let me read your quote. And he was very nervous about it. He was very, so I never got a chance to quote him. Yeah, he advocates. And when the question of quote unquote civilian casualties, he said, well, they voted for it. They elected that government. In other words, they have what's coming, which is an interesting idea since Israel's carrying out a genocide and the population voted for that government. Well, you get the point. In any event, so then he said, how about Benny Morris? I said, of course, he's serious, and I know his work very well. And then he says, but with destiny. And I said, well, look, if I say no to that, it'll make me look like a coward. Then I'm afraid to debate Morris. I figured, I said, look, if he wants to bring along that thing, that's fine. You know, that's a choice. And I'll go on with mooing. But I would never have done it. Why would I do that?
Yeah, it's tough. It's in this ecosystem. I mean, you're a scholar and you have written the preeminent book on Gaza and you have a career that you can stand on its own. But in this media space for people who are trying to make a go of it, the way you do it is by sort of leveling up and engaging with people who have bigger audiences than you. So a lot of people do feel compelled to entertain folks simply because they have a larger audience. And I don't think that's a completely self-serving project if the goal is to competently explain to the other person's audience why the person that they like is so wrong. Right. I've seen Nathan Robinson's theory about accepting these sorts of debates is that basically it's okay if you know you're going to win, but the damage you can do to your movement if you are unprepared and you get owned on that big platform is, of course, real, you know. So not you, but others, I think, do feel drawn into these kinds of debates. And that's why they're so popular and why there's so many takers. And I do, frankly, feel like this was a public service that you did it, even though I completely empathize with your revulsion at the idea of it. You did so well. I have a treat for you, actually. There is a clip that I happened to just come across on the internet. You were saying that you aren't being invited on to mainstream platforms, but the largest podcast in the world recently had something to say about Destiny that was very much in line with their assessment of him. Coleman Hughes was talking to Joe Rogan on his podcast, I guess about his new book and stuff, and Destiny came up. And I wanted to show you this clip.
Ben Shapiro should debate Destiny.
Oh my God! I know they did. They did debate.
Did they really?
Yeah, absolutely. They did. Who hosted them? Was it Lex? Was it? I could be getting that wrong, but I think Lex hosted a debate like 2 months ago.
Well, he had a debate a couple of months ago, but it was a Palestine.
No, that was separate.
Debate.
I also saw that.
Oh,
That was like
they
the
did.
4 hours. Yeah, there you go.
That guy debates everybody.
Yeah.
He's so ridiculous. He does his Wikipedia search and then just starts going after things like he's an expert.
Yeah.
It's just it was a fun time. It's a really fun time.
Yeah.
A fun time for watching people flail.
Norm, he took your line. Are you secretly friends with Joe Rogan and gossiping on a text thread about how Destiny just reads quotes off of Wikipedia?
He boasts about that. It's not,
Does he really?
It's not as if people are making it, pinning that on him. He gets all his information. When I kept saying, in the course of that debate, I kept saying, "Where'd you get that from? Wikipedia?" He didn't deny it. That is where he gets his information. I very much doubt he's ever read a book in his adult life. I don't. He has this weird code. It's, people, young men who live in their parents' or grandparents' basement, and they shovel between video games and Pornhub, and in between they listen to Destiny. And
You're brutal.
they're so protective of him. It's amazing that the moment they want to, it's a phenomenon, if you don't mind my saying, it's a phenomenon like Rush Limbaugh. It was always a kind of perplexity. What exactly was his appeal? And the appeal was, here was Rush Limbaugh, not very bright, a very large man, not very attractive. And suddenly he's whining and dining with all these important people. So it's if you don't mind my saying so, every white loser projects themselves on Rush Limbaugh. I could one day be like him,
It's aspirational.
Yeah, and that's the same thing with that thing named Destiny, his cult following. They're very protective of him because they see themselves in his shoes one day. That's how I understand the phenomenon, because I've never seen such protectiveness. Personally, I wish he would take his cult with him, go down to Guyana, bring along the Kool-Aid, and do what Jim Jones.
No. Okay.
Really, that would be doing a service to humanity.
Norman. Okay, look, I will say you and I have had this debate before, and I think one of our first conversations together, where I do have, I think, a complicated relationship with kind of academia and credentialing. And there's a part of me that finds it appealing to have an everyman who's self-taught, and there is real information on the internet outside of Wikipedia, and who is able to cobble together genuine knowledge and apply himself rhetorically in a way that is persuasive without all of the trimmings of being in the in club. And I think that's a kind of approachability that is positive, that someone might be willing to listen to what a Twitch streamer says in a way they never would have tuned in to a John Mearsheimer interview, let's say, just because the tone of it is more accessible. Like, I think that's a good thing. My biggest qualm with Destiny is the substantive politics. And I did find the moments where he just fully owned thinking it would be appropriate to drop a nuclear bomb, or the insistence that the number of deaths were vastly overstated. Those kind of moments that just reeked of inhumanity was what made me develop real, contempt for his perspective.
There's something to be said, Briahna. People bring different levels of knowledge to different topics. That's perfectly understandable. I would not debate climate science. I would not do that. What can I tell you? When it comes to 99% of topics that are of human concern, we all do the same thing. We defer to expertise. because there's no way we can master 99% of those topics. There's a certain element of humility. When we're talking about the question of, it was the same thing with Coleman Hughes, by the way. The question of the horrific conditions in which the people of Gaza had to live. Since really 1991, already in the early 2000s, people, very diverse places on the political spectrum, very different places on the political spectrum, they were describing Gaza as, if you take Baruch Kimmerling, a sociologist at Hebrew University, he described Gaza as the largest concentration camp ever. If you take Giora Eiland, who was the head of Israel's National Security Council, he described Gaza as a huge concentration camp. It's an awful place. The British economist described it as a toxic dump. And then you have this thing come along, and he says, what's your metric? What's your metric? First of all, to my knowledge, that thing is still struggling with long division. So with this presumptuous, what's your metric? You know? I said to my friend Marine, the only metric he knows is the one he read off his Peter meter, if you know what that is. You can look that up.
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.